And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Kanell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe. Smash that like and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 tailgate, where Jerry says, "Save me. I've been stuck in my house since Tuesday." Whether it's weather, whether it's the sicknesses, we're going through it.
I want to know where Jerry is. Like, is he in Pensacola, where they've got the record snowfall since 1895? Is he sick, like you were talking about? Is he maybe still stuck in Atlanta after the travel nightmare that a lot of people had to go through? Like, I want to know where he is.
Oh, yeah, let us know, Jerry. Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah, Georgia. Yeah. He's probably snowed in.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm glad you got home. Danny, how did you get the better of it in terms of the Atlanta airport and being able to not only deal with the security lines as I was following along, riveted, but also then the snow-related delays and cancellations that you had there in the airport?
All these common folk were playing checkers. I was out here playing chess. Have you guys heard about the hack? I don't even know if I want to give it out, but just
don't give it out. Just tell us off.
Don't give it out.
No, well, then people are going to start using it.
I know.
It's like Bud saving his best plays for himself and not putting him on the lock.
The Atlanta airport hour, that was 3 hours long. It was outside. Ross Dellinger. We had multiple reporters, boots on the ground, that were stuck there furiously, putting out stories about where they were. International terminal.
Ooh.
It took 6 minutes. It was nobody there. Everybody was in a good mood. It's like, hey, feel free. Come on right this way. It's a little bit of a hassle. Like, if you were cutting it close, you'd still probably want to do it if the security lines are that bad. But like, if it's a normal day, but you take, if you have a driver, you take, if you take an Uber, tell them to drop you at the international terminal. If you have a rental car, which I did, there's actually a little shuttle, not the tram, a little shuttle, and you take it to the international terminal. The funny thing is, got on the shuttle, took it over to the domestic terminal, like the South, and I see the line of people. I'm like, holy crap. And then I start noticing, I'm like, wait, there's a lot of Ohio State fans. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans. I'm like, they're not traveling international. And the secret was out. Like, people were loading up to get over there, but I had left plenty of time just in case it didn't work. There were some people frantic that I do think made their flights because they made that little move. A bunch of people on social media told me to do it, and I was like, I'll try it. I had my story ready to go. I was like, all right, I'm going to tell them I'm going to the Bahamas through Palm Beach. If they ask, like, where are you going international? They don't even ask. You don't need a passport. It's just regular. And then you go.
Yeah, it just puts you on the wrong side of the airport if you're willing to be able to trek back. And if the option is the super long, literally out the door into the freezing cold line, or that. Man.
So I had like an hour to kill. So I went to the International Delta Sky Club and was sipping on mimosas while everybody else is out the cold. I should have live tweeted it, been like, give me some updates. Show me your pictures. As I was in there getting a little egg station, some pancakes, some waffles. It was the way to go.
El Senor Daniel getting through on the international terminal. Great work right there. All right, so here's the deal. Thursdays are a very special day when we get to this time of the year because it really is one of the most interactive days. It is a day that we open up that big old bag of mail. Lots of different ways to get mailbag questions in. They include leaving us a 5-star review, and in that review, you put your mailbag question. You can jump into the tailgate early, and I grabbed a couple questions from before the show started. We will address those throughout the show as well. Sometimes we will solicit for questions on social media. You can always pitch us ideas. We will grab them. We will address as many of them as possible. So Thursdays are mailbag days, usually here over the next several weeks. We will continue to enjoy getting that conversation going again now that we don't have any more locks. But it's okay. So we're going to be able to keep this thing going. So before we jump into the big old bag of mail, there is one last piece of business. We do need, shout out to Jeff Banks, to hit Poll Assassin one more time. The final AP Top 25 poll of the season was released shortly after the national championship game. It was not out in time for us to be able to hit it on the Instant Reaction Pod or the CBS Sports Network show, but it is out now, to which I was wondering if anybody, Bud, I saw you having this conversation on social media. How much do you think rankings should react to postseason results?
I mean, with the 12-team playoff now, I really just don't care about the end-of-season rankings, and I don't want to just torpedo this segment. But I mean, realistically, like your top 12 teams or so make the playoff 13 to 25, 13 to 45, argue amongst yourselves. But I do think it's important somewhat to keep it logically consistent. Like if Alabama, who had all their players play, loses to Michigan and they had all their guys opt out, that's probably not a team that should be rated above Michigan, especially when you figure like their last month of the season. Didn't look amazing against Auburn, lost to a legitimately bad Oklahoma team. Like that's
Or they shouldn't be ahead of Illinois. Like that's what the AP top 25 voters are like. Okay, Alabama had everybody play, lost to a Michigan team that opted out. Illinois had players opting out, and they beat South Carolina that had Lenore Sellers. We see Illinois move up. They finished at number 16 in the AP top 25 poll for the season. Alabama one spot behind them at 17. Miami gets penalized again, for their performance in a loss in the Pop-Tart Bowl. They end up taking a spill. South Carolina, as we mentioned, they take a big drop. There are some other, spots where Oregon does not face a huge penalty. That is where the regular season body of work is still being respected. They were number 1 going into the playoff. They finished the year at number 3. The Georgia Bulldogs, they fall down to number 6. So, among teams that have 3 losses at the very end of the season, they don't even finish as the top one there. So Arizona State gets a big jump up. It's a very mixed bag in terms of what matters and what doesn't when it comes to making this final statement on the year. And I actually, Bud, do think the final AP top 25 poll matters just for posterity and history purposes. We don't have a final college football playoff rankings. You could argue that it will determine coaches' raises or whatever. But just when we take the snapshot of the season, this final ranking will be what goes into Wikipedia. This final ranking will be sort of like how we define the year. So I am always interested to give it at least, 8 to 9 minutes to take a look at it in terms of, what it means moving forward.
Cosign 8 to 9 minutes. I think the SEC defenses got exposed in the bowl season, to be honest. Like a lot of the power ratings out there were like, wow, 12 or 13 of these SEC defenses are considerably improved from what they were in 2023. And I think the factually correct statement is no, the quarterback play in the SEC this year was way down. And thus, what the metrics aren't totally picking up. Like Sam Leavitt would have been a top 2 quarterback in the SEC this year?
I mean,
he lit Texas ass up.
Right.
Who in the SEC would you take over Sam Leavitt for this season?
For this past season?
I would have him over Quinn Ewers. I thought he played better than Quinn did.
I think he was playing better than Quinn Ewers at the end of the season.
End of the year, yeah. Sam Leavitt.
I don't think he was all season.
Yeah, Sam Leavitt in September and Sam Leavitt in December were a different player. And that, shocker, redshirt freshmen get better as the year goes on. But I would agree with at least
I guess Dart people say in the chat, but to me, everything with Dart's just totally schemed up. I don't think you're gonna have any drop off to Austin Simmons at all with Ole Miss. I don't think Dart's anything special.
NFL guys are really kind of falling in love with Dart right now. Back to the poll. Texas has 3 losses. One of them was to Ohio State. Who were the other 2 to?
Oh, Georgia.
And who are they ranked 2 spots ahead of?
Yes, thank you. That makes no sense.
It's let's see, both of these teams, if you when you're putting your ballot together, you could be like, all right, well, Texas lost to the Ohio State team that won it all. Georgia lost to the Notre Dame team that got to the title game. So it's kind of similar losses as far as that. And it's but I'm still going to put Texas ahead of Georgia on my ballot, even though they have 2 losses to Georgia, just because I don't know. I guess the voters were ranking Georgia based on Gunnar Stockton, Georgia, instead of Carson Beck. I don't know.
Oh yeah, just in case they played again.
Just in case they have to play.
Is this a ranking or a forward roll?
That's what I'm saying.
This is a power ranking.
You never know.
And I'm kind of with Bud. I have no problem talking about it for 8 or 9 minutes, but I think it's really stupid. In fact, what Tom just mentioned makes 0 sense whatsoever. You beat them twice, and your records are very similar, and you're ranked behind them. It doesn't. And if anything, you beat them in their backyard, and the second time you beat them without your starter for the whole second half. That should be even more of a case why you're the better football team than Texas is. Not to bag on Texas, because I would have them just behind Georgia, but I don't understand how you explain that one away.
You going to be in studio with Zuck anytime soon?
No, is he the one
Because
that
you
did
can
it?
ask him why he has Texas 3 and Georgia 6.
Oh boy. We might have some words.
We have to talk to Zuck when we see him next time about
Tell
that.
him we don't have the SEC anymore. That's what I want to tell him too. Like, slide somebody else in there.
Yeah, he's hey, listen, Zuck's a big fan of the show. Come on. Actually, you know what? That would be the ultimate button for Poll Assassin, is for us to actually get an AP voter on here to take us
Defend
through
their vote.
Yeah.
He no longer runs it, but let's just get Ralph Russo on here and yell at him about it.
Yeah, I know. He thought he escaped it by heading over to the Athletic, but no, we're still going to hold his feet to the fire on that one. Any other sort of movements or adjustments or things of note? It was, for the most part, a very similar 25. And look, we're not. I just finished the CBS Sports 134 yesterday, looking at the count, looking at the changes. You're not going to have major adjustments based on one final data point. And for many of these teams, ones that were impacted by opt-outs, transfer portal, NFL draft, and the like. But anything else stand out about the final AP Top 25 poll?
Fine, I'll pull it up.
That might help.
I mean, not by the aggregate outside of what I just mentioned. There are some individual ballots where I'm just kind of like, all right, but I don't know. There are some people who you have to wonder, like, do they even really consider the bowl games when they put together their rankings? Because maybe they don't. Like, maybe they sit there and say, well, this result doesn't really mean anything to me, so I'm not going to change it. And maybe that's why some voters have Illinois 5 spots behind South Carolina on their ballot.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How?
Derek Red of the Charleston Gazette Mail. He's also has Texas at 3, 2 spots ahead of Georgia.
Now, if I'm correct, that's West
Look,
Virginia. That's
if I
West
was in
Virginia, Charleston, right? That
Oh,
is
Charleston,
South
West
Carolina.
Virginia.
Yeah, Charleston, West Virginia.
I was gonna say, like, if I had answered like South Carolina fans and I was a writer for that paper in that state, I would totally just lie and like I don't care. It's not really part of my job. Like I don't want to hear about it in my mentions over Christmas.
Yeah, like he's got South Carolina still at 18. He left Colorado at 19 even after they got crushed. Iowa State, he did manage to put ahead of Miami, but he still got Illinois at 23, which is where he had Illinois at the end of the regular season, which is why there's a part of me that's wondering why, or maybe he's just somebody who does not take the Bulls into account when it comes to his final rankings.
Would any of you guys think I was crazy if I made the case for Oregon at number 2?
No.
I mean, because that was one I looked at, and I get it. Like, Notre Dame made it to the championship. They lost on the field, but they didn't beat them, which Oregon did. You've got some common opponents in there in Penn State as well, and they didn't lose to Northern Illinois. Like, I was kind of thinking Oregon might make that case. I get it. And I think this is one where it just gets kind of lazy, where you just go 1-2. Those teams played right there. But I do think if Oregon played Notre Dame, and there's the hypothetical that no one likes, then I do think I would take Oregon every single time. And path that we talked a lot about, Notre Dame did get to face Georgia with a backup, but they had their own issues too.
I mean, I don't know. I think that I give Notre Dame to even I'm not defending laziness, but if you were to say they beat an Indiana team that I think is awesome, they still defeated a Georgia team that, even with Gunnar Stockton, Texas couldn't do that in the second half. You went on and you beat Penn State, granted not by the same margin as Oregon, but not that different. It was a different game, but still a 1-score game. And then, of course, you end up falling short. I do think that Notre Dame got quality wins added to its resume in the college football playoff that I think
clearly
certainly were among the best wins that they had all season. So I get that.
I would have Oregon at 3. I can understand an argument for 2, but the one interesting thing to me, and I tweeted this before, like a couple days ago, at least not interesting, but just funny to me, is that before the playoff, Oregon was the only undefeated team left in the country. After the playoff, they're the only 1-loss team left in the country.
I mean, maybe deserves a little respect.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Awesome.
And that loss was to a team that they beat.
Right. They beat everyone on their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
That was the old, I think Auburn. There was an Auburn team that had that Georgia. Georgia lost to Auburn in November, but then they beat them in the SEC championship game. So Kirby Smart got to be out there and say, hey, look, we beat everybody on our schedule.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting claim for the Oregon Ducks. Also, I saw an Oregon State fan in the tailgate mentioning, actually, final rankings mean a ton to us because we don't always finish in the top 25. And so when you get to say top 25 finish, they don't hang a banner necessarily, but it's like banner adjacent when you're at one of those programs that doesn't always finish in its final top 25.
What do you do if you're SMU, Indiana, Penn State, Georgia? Do you think it depends on the program? What you do put to denote that you made the college football playoff?
Yeah, you say college football playoff. It's the same way that basketball teams do with a Final Four.
Yeah. But so Final Four, but even if you just make it and get bounced in the first round, you're still going to put.
Do you hang Sweet 16 banners in college? Like, I don't watch college basketball.
Indiana does.
Duke does not.
Yeah, Duke
does not.
It depends on how many banners you've got. And then they do a consolidated banner. Well, they'll say Sweet 16, and then you just list all the years on one banner.
Yeah.
At this point, I think that you hang a banner, especially if you're SMU and Indiana.
Right.
You know, like
but I don't know if Georgia's going to put like quarterfinals. Woo.
Yeah. No, you're more proud of your SEC championship.
Yes, that's the banner you hang.
That's the banner. That's
you guys going to be long term, because like I think that like that kind of stuff's going, like the whole conference prize stuff's going to go away with mega conferences.
I think
like, I bet you we don't have an SEC title game in like 5 years.
Sure, but I mean, I still think for SEC fans, winning the SEC championship means something. It's
just so disconnected. Like, I mean, the schedules are so disparate. I'm like, cool, congrats, you won a conference title now. But like, that's not Georgia's fault. It's just the size of the conference means it's just very disconnected to me.
I think that's good, objective, cold-hearted analysis. But I'm talking
still
about
won it.
Yeah, yeah. That's really smart. I wasn't asking for smart, bud.
The schedule,
fine. All right.
I mean, no. Here,
we hit 8 minutes on this yet?
The SEC's been a 12-team league for how long? Even before expansion, they still only played 8 games. There's always been disparity between the schedules. They still celebrated the conference championship. I don't think that's going to change at all. Now, as far as what the priority is, maybe that will change. But just one last thing here, because I like I said, I would have Notre Dame at 2, Oregon at 3. But to the Notre Dame fans in the chat who are mad at Danny and they're talking about how Oregon lost by 20 to Ohio State on a neutral field, what might the final score of the title game have been had Emeka Egbuka not fumbled? Just gonna ask you to ask yourself that question. It was 31.
Why did the ratings peak at 26 but actually come in at 22?
Yeah,
because a lot of people, I think rightly so, turned that game off. And Notre Dame, to their credit, came back, but like it was very, very close to being a 3 or 4 score game.
I don't have any problem with Notre Dame being 2. I just brought it up because we needed 8 minutes.
Coming up on the other side, we don't have any coaching carousel movement at the head coaching level, but a very, very important coordinator has made a move. We'll get into all that and your questions next. We back here on the Cover 3 podcast. We actually had a question about this. Andrew, about an hour before we got started. Thanks, Andrew. He pulled up to the tailgate, opened up a cold one or some coffee, whatever you need. Any information on who will be the next Notre Dame defensive coordinator? Will they promote Mike Mickens or search for an outside candidate? Andrew asked this question because Al Golden has been hired as the next defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals. He had already spent some time on that Cincinnati Bengals defensive staff. It is not a huge shocker that that after making a move on their defensive coordinator, Cincinnati would be interested. They were waiting for the season to end. Season ends. Things move quickly. Al Golden is gone. Now, he did a really, really good job, not just with sort of like developing this defense and helping them be able to overcome all the injuries, but obviously game preparation, the way that he called it, He got a lot of compliments all throughout college football. So what is the move for Marcus Freeman in terms of the future of that DC position?
I think it'll be Mike Mickens.
Okay.
Like I also think that I doubt Al Golden's interest in NFL jobs, if they came open to him, was a secret to Marcus Freeman and anybody on that staff. So I feel like there's probably been some work done on this and expectation of this. Now, that doesn't mean they won't look outside, because I think if you look at the college market, I don't know if you're if you've got Notre Dame's money, you just got a fresh 20 million. Maybe if there's somebody out there that you really want, you can go prime away from their current gig. The NFL cycle's still going on. So I can't rule it out, but I think if you're looking at how that defense worked this year, Mickens was a part of it too. Like Golden was the coordinator, but Mickens was played a big role. So I think that's just the natural, easy way to do it.
I don't have any new names on this. I really haven't been asking for it. Mickens makes sense given how well that defense played. And obviously, the guys are recruiter as well. You guys see the stuff in the chat? Like people mentioned Jim Knowles. That OU, like Oklahoma, if the chat can clarify that. Like what?
Oh, there's the Oklahoma fans are talking about Jim Knowles. I mean, Dusty lives.
Like I mean,
the
chance Venables gets fired, I think is real high after next year. I mean, unless Mateer is like way better than I think. Why would you leave Ryan Day, who just won a national title, to go what is very potentially like a 1-year tenure? Is there like some like to get back to Oklahoma thing there, or like that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
You never know what's going on with somebody, what they might want to be doing. Maybe there's something personal. Maybe he's got personal reasons to go back there. He was at Oklahoma State, so he's familiar, obviously, with the territory. I'm with you. Why would you leave that for a?
But you probably get a 3-year deal, right? Like if you're Knowles and you're like, hey, Oklahoma wants me. It's like, yeah, well, Brent, I mean, look how many people left you this year because you're not the easiest person to work for in the world. I'm going to need a guaranteed 3-year deal.
Yeah. I'll believe it when I see it too. Like I know there's been a lot of rumblings and a lot of rumors. I still believe it when I see it.
Multiple people in the chat are responding fiance in Oklahoma.
Look, that is also an Ohio State coaching staff with a lot of big personalities.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like clearly they had some. I know like a lot of Ohio State fans like who's going to win out on how the D line's used and coached. I mean, that was a big time thing. And ultimately, I think Knowles won out. But
Knowles has also been around long enough that he might not be into playing politics.
Right.
Yep. Makes sense too.
Can she not move to Ohio?
That's a great point. You got a pretty nice thing going there.
Hey, I love you. I'm making $5 million a year in Ohio. Do you want to move to Ohio with me?
Right. Maybe it's all leverage. Maybe he's in chat rooms floating the rumor.
Oh, there we go. Let's take that. All
There's got to be something out there to make you leave that situation that he's got to go to Oklahoma. Not to bash Oklahoma, but you got a lot more stability. And you're coming off a national championship. I don't think it's clearly kind of tells you that maybe he's done like any interest in becoming a head coach is probably just there's nothing wrong with that. But it feels like if you wanted to be a head coach, I think you would definitely stay at Ohio State and try to parlay that. But it feels like he's just saying, all right, I'm a D coordinator.
How old is he?
A lot of money doing it. 58, I believe. Yeah, I looked up.
59 on.
He's 59.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he turned 60 in April.
So that probably has something to do with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just you're not to me, and I'm not speaking for Jim Knowles, but to me, you've had a good career. You know, like you're the playing the ladder, climb the ladder games might not be there. Here's my thought on Mike Mickens. If it does end up just being a promotion internally, I think that he has done a really good job of not only coaching up, but I think his evaluation process of the defensive backfield has been really good. I think that, we just continue to see some players come in there. They've got NFL bodies. They've got skills. You're like, wow. And then sometimes there's some players in that backfield that surprise you. And you're like, wow, you know what? Christian Gray had a really good season. Like that was somebody who was maybe a little bit more ready to go than I thought coming into it. And they've had some depth. They've been able to overcome the injuries to Ben Morrison. It was a strength for this group. It's kind of been his thing to be able to evaluate, and in the future of football, continuing to need to have those kinds of secondaries. I think that that's something that's pretty effective and allows them to be better up front as well. So I like it if that ends up being it, because he's certainly proven himself at multiple levels that you would want for the defensive coordinator. All right, let's get back into the tailgate. This one's a little, actually, you know what? We're going to go ahead and hit this because we haven't done it in a while. All right. So
Chip only likes that graphic because it's him.
Yeah, of course. Michael jumped in to tailgate and says, this year is all about the 20 million. How high will the payroll costs for college teams ultimately get? Are we thinking NFL level with $100 million payrolls? Where is the cap?
Aren't the NFL payrolls way more than that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say 100 million's on the low side. I thought it was closer to 220 somewhere like that. It's been going up.
Is that anymore?
The NFL salary cap is
salary cap's not real.
$273 million.
Yeah, I was going to say that felt way low.
We're only off by like 70%.
But if he said that's the new college football one, it would not surprise me that thing, but within 5 years, gets to 100 million. There are new TV contracts coming. I also think what's interesting, and I think people are still realizing this, and if you looked at the Xavier Lucas case, there are two aspects where players are going to be getting, they're going to double dip. One from the revenue agreement and one from the collective. Still, they are not going away. So even though there's an understanding that the $20 million can go to the football players, you can go well above and beyond that.
Yeah.
So you can still buy your way to a super team.
The thing is, like, the NFL player pool salary cap is like 8x what the coaches plus administrators make. So I think that's kind of the question. Like, where do you find your equilibrium on that? Because right now, most of your coaching staffs are still making, like, if you kind of add all that up, they're making slightly more or similar to what you're paying the players. The NFL seems to think like 8x is about the right number. So if you call it like 20, let's just call it 20 for round number podcasting purposes on the college coaching side, then that means the player side should bet 160 million.
Now,
I think what will happen is they'll realize these coaches are not, like, they're not worth that kind of money, and like, that'll go down before we get to 160.
I don't think their players are worth that kind of money because they're not as good. You can't use an NFL model because those are the very best that there are. And when you're talking about college football players in both the mean and the median, you're talking about a less skilled football player than what you have at the NFL.
But isn't it all relative?
Yeah, I was going to say it's relative. Yeah.
Don't you think coaches are more important in college football?
I think you're less important because you get less practice time. I think that, like, the best athletic freaks win more.
Yeah, I think, like, if you can hire a Ben Johnson, that's far more valuable than any college coach.
I think it's less important because you can still have a talent edge.
Yes, right. Like, I think players are more important in college than they are in the NFL. I think NFL,
because there is no cap and there is no parity. Even though we would all like to see it, it's just not there.
Yeah.
What about player development?
I mean,
you don't think being able to coach up somebody exists anymore?
I don't think the gap in, like, coaching quality in between most of these big schools, when you have this, like, staffs the size, everybody has a sports science stuff. I think it's very similar. I think that, like, the differentiator is the player quality.
Like, it's just getting their body ready. The idea of teaching the game of football just doesn't exist anymore.
I think it does. But I think everybody can do it.
It's some programs do it and some don't have to. Because, like, if some of these kids are just ready-made for the most part, like, they just show up. You get these 5-star and 4-stars, you got to teach them the playbook, but you don't really have to develop them.
Yeah, like, did Caleb Downs get developed? No.
No.
Did Jeremiah Smith get developed? He's the same damn player he was, when he was in high school. Like, they're just freaks.
I will say, I don't want to. There are some coaches that listen. I want to give the coaches a little bit of love.
Me too.
They're good at it. They're good at player development. But I'm saying, like, I think they all can do it at that level. You're good enough to be, like, coaching a top 20 program, man. Like, everybody who gets hired at these jobs can do that. It's just, do you get the players or do you not?
I did hear. The reason I thought is Jeremiah Smith was talking about the inside leverage that he was faced on the 3rd and long to win the game, to ice the game. And he was talking about how he, really wanted to press. I mean, the terminology that he was using of how he was going to attack inside and get on top of them were things that I'm sure he was taught by Brian Hartline. But you teach that at all levels. But I do think they're getting some development. But I still agree with the greater point, though, that the coaching doesn't matter as much in the NFL because the playing field is severely stacked in some teams' advantage, Ohio State being one of them.
One way to look at it is, if the coaches mattered that much in college, why is half of every coaching staff pretty much consist of recruiters?
Right.
I'm gonna live in my fantasy land, my naive little fantasy land.
I will say,
not everybody at the FBS level is a top 10 to 12 team, and that if we talk about college football only from the perspective of the top 10 to 12 teams, we are not given the reality from a lot of fan bases.
I get that, but like New Mexico State's not exactly doing a great job developing players. Like those
need
schools
to get better at it.
I know, but I think if you look at positions like offensive line, yeah, you have to develop players. But I think for a lot of receivers and quarterbacks and all these other stuff, you're mostly just teaching the guys their responsibilities.
Sure.
Also, if the question, like, to circle back, talks about, like, how high will it go, we're not really like New Mexico State and Louisiana Monroe are not entering that conversation. We're really talking about like 10 or 12 programs that would actually spend at that level.
Yeah.
And I think it works on the flip side. I think coaching matters that much more to player when at a place where you are at a coaching disadvantage, where you're always facing teams that are better than you. You know, I think there's a huge asset to having a coach who can develop, you know, like a Jeff Monken, you know, somewhere at a place like Army where you're, you know, constantly having to like play against teams that have better resources. I mean, I think that's why I'd give a ton of credit to Kirk Cignetti. And I know he spent more money, and the schedule wasn't that great, but he did a pretty good job getting those players ready to go.
Yeah, that is third place Indiana, okay? Right? Only 2 teams in America beat them, and they played for the national championship.
And none of this is to say like being a good schematic coach doesn't give you a tremendous advantage at the college level. It does. It gives you a huge advantage over most teams. It's just when you look at the NFL right now, all the teams that are competing to win the Super Bowls, what do they all have in common? They're not development NFL teams. They're innovative offensive teams because they have good coaches who are reinventing the offense.
Because you can't build that kind of talent edge in the NFL. Like
exactly.
Point.
I also can show you a lot of teams with a talent edge that do not develop, that players show up to that program as blue chip prospects and they do not get drafted. Or if they do, they have not, they still need more development before they're able to finally cash in on some of those God-given abilities.
I mean, Mac Brown's running from the
NFL.
Like Mac Brown's last 10 years as a head coach, you know, like the last 5 at Texas, and then like the whatever 5, was it 5 at UNC or 4?
6.
So, I mean, like last 4 Texas and the 6 at UNC obviously would, I mean, that's obviously in the A&M part. If you were to take, like, let's say the NFL spends $300 million on players plus coaches plus, you know, front office, right? Just rough numbers. That's probably pretty close. So salary cap is what, 273 we said? If you use the same ratio of college teams who are spending probably about 40 total, then it would be like 4 to coaches and 36 to the players.
Right. So
I'm not suggesting we're going to get to 100 million. I'm saying if you're going to keep paying coaches at like 20 million total, and you want to have an NFL type ratio, then you know obviously you'd be like at 160. That's not going to happen anytime soon.
Next year, do you think it's close to 40 for the top spending teams? Because that's the other thing that was really funny.
I think this year is the highest because everybody's front loading these deals like crazy because they're under the impression that the clearinghouse will not apply to deals struck before the thing officially goes into effect.
Interesting.
I think we could have it go down next year potentially, but I think we're gonna have a lot of lawsuits over this anyway. I do think we're gonna have I don't think we're gonna have $20 million college football coaches anytime soon. I think we're gonna have a serious flattening of that curve, and probably have some teams be like, yeah, we could like I think West Virginia went cheap on Rich Rod, and I like the fit, but I mean, there's he didn't have great options outside of West Virginia. I think you can spend more money on players if you're the Mountaineers and be like, cool, you want to coach here? What are they paying him for?
And some programs are going that direction already. I mean, look what Mike Norvell and Brian Kelly have done.
Yeah, I mean, those guys were. I mean, not like Norvell's a little more hot seat than Kelly was, but like, I mean, clearly they had.
They're both saying, "Let's give some of my money back to give me better players," because they realize how important it is.
Totally.
Because that was one thing that came out of the national championship. The week around it is Ohio State was not the only team with a $20 million roster, but everybody who did have a $20 million roster was more than happy to let Ohio State sort of like carry the name tag of $20 million roster. And
like
so
Texas with 22.
I think Ryan Day was laying the groundwork, by the way, with his post-game press conferences to justify the money they're going to spend to keep that team together.
Yeah.
Did you hear? He's like, they're absolutely worth it. If you think about what their worth is in our market, he's not just justifying what they did this year. I think he's like trying to say, hey, look, businesses in Columbus will absolutely support this. When it comes to the clearinghouse, they want to have evidence. Yeah, like that's not really evidence, but I think he's trying to lay the groundwork. Yeah,
for fair market value for whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, I think there was some real intent with his post-game comments.
Also, to the chat, you're taking it a little too literal here. We're not saying coaching doesn't matter at the college level. We're saying it matters more at the NFL level. It matters everywhere. Like
the difference between the 30th best player and the best player is way bigger than the difference between like the best coach and the 30th best coach. Like there's just not that big a difference, especially not when you have like the staff size. I mean, Marcus Freeman got a lot better as an in-game coach this year. He also got a lot smarter in terms of who he hired, right? You get Denbrock. You went and hired a really good analytics guy, and you said, I'm going to take that part of the game off my hands. I'm going to follow what the book says to do so that we can kind of grind out little inefficiencies in our game. Like that's the kind of stuff. I can't go hire an analytics guy to make my receiver into Jeremiah Smith. You either got the genetics or you don't.
This one comes from the 5-star mailbag. Again, you leave us a 5-star review. In that review, put your mailbag question. We will grab it for a future mailbag episode. This one was dropped. I'm time stamping it because I don't want it to be lost in terms of the context. This one was after Ohio State had beaten Texas before the national championship game. Steven asks, is Sark going to be talked about in a similar fashion to Ryan Day? Sark and Day are like the Spider-Man meme where they are both pointing at each other. Both are at schools with unlimited resources, elite talent, and both struggled to beat their rival or win, quote unquote, the big one. Texas has been underwhelming in their college football playoff SEC championship game appearances, and Oklahoma has been a big thorn in the side of Texas, even though Texas is a superior program. Granted, they took care of OU this year, but more times than not, it feels like Oklahoma pulls off the upset. Is Steve Sarkisian going to be facing some of the same rivalry and big game related pressure that Ryan Day had, at least until that title win?
Ryan Day just won a national title. Stupid. What a dumb question. You're an idiot. God. Yeah, no, there's certainly, I think there's definitely a lot of kind of similarities between the spots in that Texas has won big games. If you look at them this year, their problem was Georgia, which maybe that's their Michigan.
Right. So
you can look at it from that angle. It's like they have trouble. And then also they lost to Ohio State. So there are similarities, but I also don't think we're that far removed from Texas, quote unquote, winning the big one. I think they're going to probably in the near future.
Yeah. And if they don't, if you have, he just finished his second year, right? So if he has 2 years of Arch Manning, which is but if he gets 2 years of Arch Manning and he's 0 and all he can get to the semifinals or worse, then I think he's definitely facing some of the criticism that Ryan Day did, regardless of who he's losing to. I think there's a lot of similarities in these programs. To the question, like they both have
spending resources,
pockets, and a view of themselves of where they should be, how many championships they should have. But he's had incredible success right away. He's made the semis both years, and he's got Arch waiting in the wings. But I do think how far he goes with Arch is probably going to determine how much criticism he takes or not.
I mean, like history shows, if you're consistently playing at like a top 2 or 3 level and you can sustain that, and there's every reason to think Texas can sustain playing at that like consistent top 4, top 3, maybe top 2 level, then you'll eventually break through. I mean, Danny played on a team that eventually broke through, right? Bobby Bowden couldn't win the big one until he can. This can't win the big one stuff. It is truly nonsense.
It is amazing.
Like the James Franklin stuff, it's like, he can't win the big one. His team doesn't play like a top 4 football team in the ratings. He gets them to play like a top 5 to top 12 consistently, which is actually really, really hard to do. But they're like, he'll never win the title. Okay, well, I don't really expect him to win the national title if he's not consistently playing at that like top 4, top 3, occasionally making the argument, hey, they probably are the best team in the country, or at least making that argument for them at least, some point during the season. Like I think Lanning will get one as long as Oregon keeps spending like they spend. I think Sarkisian will probably get one. It's really just, can you keep getting elite players into your program? And is there something fundamentally holding you back? I don't know. Like Texas was real soft this year up front. They couldn't run the ball worth a damn. I know they lost some running backs, but they also didn't run block at all. And their screen game, like they got kind of bullied, I think is probably the word I can say on the show, by Georgia twice, like eaten up on the outside. So, the offense to me was soft this year. Is that like a fundamental problem? Because it wasn't last year. Last year was a physical offense. I don't think there's anything intrinsic about that Texas program that says they can't be physical again and can't run the ball, and they recruit like gangbusters. So I think Sark's going to get one.
I think Steve Sarkisian. I think Steve Sarkisian wasn't born on third base. I'm saying like Ryan Day inherited a winner. Ryan Day inherited a program that was operating at a great level, and Steve Sarkisian did not. And he broke through the Texas's back, like wall that had been continually moving ever since like 2010. Like he was the one that actually got the Longhorns sort of over the finish line. They when they won the Big 12 last season, it was their first conference title in a decade. or even since that 2009 season, more than a decade. So when I see them go from, it's like 5 wins, 8 wins, breakthrough, 12 wins, 13 wins, I don't think Steve Sarkisian and Ryan Day are quite the same, because what I've seen from him is him fundamentally changing the way the roster is constructed by building up both lines of scrimmage. And I've seen him guide Texas from one conference to the other, hit the ground running. They were playing for the conference title. I don't have the same like ticking clock in terms of like, come on, Steve, you had it all going, Steve. Why don't you have a title yet, Steve? I think that Sark instead has been doing it in a little bit more of like a linear, organic kind of build.
Yeah, the pressure on Day. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just making a joke.
I think the pressure on Day is because he was handed a juggernaut when Urban left.
Right. And Texas was not a juggernaut. And that's what I've heard some Texas fans talk about Quinn. They're like, look, did we get frustrated with him? Yes, but he was the face of like Texas getting things back on track, back to where we want to be. And so he's always going to hold like a special part for some, not all Texas fans, but for some Texas fans for that work there.
And Sark doesn't dye his beard.
Also true.
Hey, I don't judge people for that.
I wouldn't either.
Only for the show.
All right. Coming up on the other side, we will continue answering your questions, including Texas A&M. Some thoughts on the defensive staff and more next.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Carousel! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. This question comes from Kyle. Can y'all give thoughts on Mike Elko calling plays on defense next year? Sounds like Jay Bateman, the defensive coordinator, was demoted as play caller. As a Texas A&M fan, I love Elko's defense, but worry about it being another Jimbo situation. Ooh, he does. Texas A&M fans do have scars from those anthologies of paper that Jimbo used to have with his readers on the sideline. Thoughts here?
I mean, I don't know that it's like a negative. Elko is a really good DC, I think. If he wants to call it, put it in his hands, I don't really have a problem with that. I think Bateman's pretty respected. Florida liked him. I don't think they're real happy to lose him. So, I mean, was he liked at Carolina?
He ended up catching the there was a relationship obviously with Dre Bly in North Carolina with Dre Bly and Matt Brown. And
yes, he didn't want Dre to be the DB coach.
And there was some.
Okay.
I
remember that now. Yeah.
It was not either he goes or I go, but it might have been a cousin of either he goes or I go. And Jay Bateman ended up leaving. And Gene Chizik was hired.
I think Morgan's got a pretty good kind of summation of those. Morgan L says Bateman's an interesting case. Smart and good coaches think he's good, but does he ever prove it how anyone wants? That's kind of a good summation so far.
So probably overrated for what he did at Army, given that you get to play opposite of a really slow pace. Probably not entirely his fault at North Carolina, given that nobody has been able to call a successful defense under Mac Brown at Carolina yet. Well, I mean,
I know you can take that back to Butch. I mean, that has been a defense that has gotten shredded pretty consistently.
You know why?
Because that soft baby
the practice habits, yeah.
Because that baby blue, soft ass uniforms.
And then at Florida,
he was the linebackers coach.
Yeah, and he was basically like he was mostly working with the guys Mullen recruited at the end, and Mullen got run out because he couldn't recruit. Okay, yeah, I don't know that like you should be up in arms that he's not calling it now. I mean, I don't know if he's earned like just inalienable right to call the defense.
Well, and also to his Jimbo question, I'm not going to say that like you should not have nightmares as though this is going to be a bad thing that Mike Elko is calling your plays. He's Mike Elko. Like he's going to be heavily involved in everything during the week in putting together the game plan. And if there's something that comes over the headset that he doesn't like, you can bet your ass he's going to jump in there and figure out a way to make an audible along the way. So I'm not going to I'm not going to say it's a bad thing at all that you have somebody who I look at as one of the sharper defensive minds in the sport to having an active role in the way that you call it. So I'm not gonna freak out about that. All right, let's see what else do we got here. Oh, this is a fun one. Matthew, do other conferences or fan bases adore play-by-play guys as much as the SEC? Tennessee hired Mike Keith to be the voice of the Vols, and we remember John Ward, Larry Munson, and is it Jack Crystal? Jack Crystal also come to mind. Do other so this is a Matthew, clearly an SEC fan. Do other conferences and fan bases adore play-by-play guys as much as the SEC? What do you think?
I know Gene Deckeroff was loved for his entire tenure at Florida State, and he was there for a long time.
Fire the cannons.
Yeah,
that was with his Tampa Bay work. Yeah,
he's great with Tampa too.
Eli Gold was pretty beloved at Alabama.
Yeah.
I don't know if LSU has a guy like long term.
Who's Michigan's guy that I think just stepped down? Michigan had a long time, so I do think.
I think
Deerdorf and somebody else.
Yeah, Deerdorf and I can't remember his name.
That guy was around a long time though, and I think he just stepped down. I think he was a voice that was like beloved by the fans. Think about it, a lot of fans do listen to the radio call while they're at the game almost.
Yeah.
If they can't watch it on TV, they're listening. I think it's probably, the fan bases that top 40, top 50 fan bases that have had a lot of moments and that have passionate fan followings. Yeah, I think they all do have an affinity for their guys, calling the plays.
Miami, was it?
Oh, Joe Zagacki.
Yeah,
that's my guy.
He's been on there forever.
Don Brown Jr.
I've got a theory.
Tom Bailey.
Some of the most beloved radio voices might be from teams that weren't on television until things really started to explode. Like if you were a diehard fan of the team that was not getting picked for one of the 5 games that was going to be on TV during that week, that your only option was to listen to the radio call to be able to hear it if you weren't there. I feel like those voices are probably all retiring right now too. That was my other thought, was that it's like, how many younger fans are going to the radio call, or is that something that is kind of aging out with a generation of a fan base?
It's probably aging out a bit.
Gosh, we're losing so many good things. I think Gene Deckeroff hosting the Bobby Bowden show. Like there's still TV shows that everyone's dialed in to watch the highlights of. There's just so much content. I mean, they're clearly listening to Cover 3 Pod instead of going back to listen to those. But that was a time, and so they had kind of face recognition too, because the fan bases would try to watch those coaches shows every Sunday.
The other theory, if you want to go with the SEC or the South, cares more about their radio guys or have greater attachment. If you were really, really good on the radio at Ohio State or Michigan or wherever, most of these northern teams have NFL markets. And so I think you were more likely to get plucked away to do NFL radio. Whereas in the South, I mean, like the Falcons are relatively new in the grand history of the NFL, and they've sucked for almost their entire tenure. The Bucs are pretty decent now, but for most of my lifetime have been terrible. Like the Dolphins.
Wes is going to come get you. He's going to come get you in your sleep. Wes Durham, the voice of the Falcons.
Well, they're good now.
Georgia Tech.
Yeah, right. I mean, like Carolina Panthers.
Also,
they were good for a little bit.
Like I know, like in Illinois, like our radio guy does football, he does basketball, he does so it's like if you're in the South, when you didn't have the professional teams, like your radio announcers were calling the football games, they were calling the basketball games, they were calling the baseball games, so they were kind of just like your narrator of your the teams you cared about. So I think that's probably a part of it too.
I want to know, do any of you guys know who Pete Arbogast is? He's USC's radio play-by-play. And I just found a picture of him. I guess he's been there for 25 plus years. I'd be curious to know if USC fans adore him, know some of his signature calls, the way that some of the guys that we've talked about. I was just trying to, because Bud brought up the West Coast aspect to it. Sure, there are. Maybe they're just not as well known.
I don't think LA sports fans care nearly as much about sports the same way that the rest of the country does.
That is probably extremely fair. How about this one? Vance says, will radio guys be replaced by watch-along people? Streamers.
Stu Feiner watching.
Stu Feiner.
I don't get it.
What, watch-alongs?
Yeah. Like the streams never time up with what you're seeing at home. So it's like if you're watching a game and you're also got like a second screen stream going, like they're like 20 seconds behind. So it's like you watch it and then you go to your stream to see their reactions to it 20 seconds later while you miss what's actually happening at the time. I don't get it. Doesn't do it for me.
I love it for if you're going to a game, and I'll say this for any sporting event, the pregame and the postgame show on the radio when you're sitting in traffic about to get to a game or leave. That is, as a modern sports fan in 2025, that's where my heart sort of like leans into it, because just to like get you prepped, like having that staff, like that, streamers, watch along people, that they are never going to be able to replace that. They're not going to be able to replace what you get in terms of the authenticity of that pregame and postgame show on the radio to sort of set the table and then ultimately recap and bring you the sound from everything afterwards. All right. Let's do
HQ.
What?
Yeah, Danny's got to go do HQ.
Yeah, Danny's got to go do
HQ. Go talk NFL.
We'll leave on this one. Did the playoff run cement Ryan Day as a top 2 coach in college football right now?
Sure. He won a national title.
Is there a clear one, or are we going Kirby?
Yes.
Yeah.
He has. They're the only 3 active coaches with national championships are Kirby, Day, and Dabo. Obviously, Kirby and Dabo both have 2. Ryan Day has 1. Ryan Day's record is 70-10.
That's decent.
Overall, 70-10. He is 46-5 in Big Ten play. He has finished ranked inside the top 10 every single year that he has been a head coach.
And you said it, he's 46-5 against the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is the best conference in the world because they've won the last 2 national titles.
Also, what's his second worst loss? Because the worst loss is clearly losing to this Michigan team at home.
This Michigan team, yeah.
It's a top 5 loss. I mean, it's another one of the Michigan losses.
Right. It's like, so you lost to a Final Four team? Like, that's the second. So he's got 1 really bad loss and 9 losses that are legitimately the teams who either won the national title, played for it, or basically made the playoff and got beat by the team that did win the national title.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
That's pretty good.
It's decent.
I mean, is there any? Hold on, I'm trying to pull this off the top of my head right now. Has there been any?
Ryan's right. The Oregon home loss to Mario.
I was about to say, has there been any
that's a good call.
That was when they realized they had to fire Kerry Coombs. Kerry Coombs, the DC who Urban wanted kept over, and they're like, nah, this guy can't call it.
Yeah, Oregon came in the 2021 football season. Oregon came into the shoe, won 35-28. They ended up working their way all the way back up inside the top 4 before losing up to number 2 in the country before losing at Michigan 42-27 that season.
That wasn't Justin Herbert, right?
No, that's Anthony Brown.
There we go. Yeah. Say, it'd be one thing if you lost to like the Justin Herbert version of Oregon, but yeah.
The Justin Herbert version of Oregon wasn't even the Justin Herbert,
Yeah, but they won the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
When they got to the Rose Bowl, did they win? I just remember Herbert balled out in that game.
I know, yes. Herbert did show flashes a lot.
Which led to like the why the hell haven't they been doing this with him all year kind of talk.
Fade Justin Herbert's offensive coordinator as a principal when
it was
Arroyo
profitable for us for a while there.
Yeah. A lot more. Okay. So we are going to continue to advance things along. Did the Cowboys just hire their coach? I
don't know. Did they?
It's not Dion.
You got the Twitter alert of Brian Schottenheimer.
Okay, yeah, and then he's
that might be a troll.
No. Jonathan Jones had him as a one of the top candidates or early this week. So I would imagine that's if that got solidified. I guess our Dion watch is done.
Are we doing the great hire? No idea if it'll work out thing on Brian Schottenheimer.
It's a great hire.
I've got no
great hire. Jason Witten will be a great hire on that staff. Cowboys are cowboying.
I am not.
Jerry wants to work with family.
Yeah.
That's the greatest gift I gave myself, was just working with my family.
I'm not going to give it to my son, but I'll give it to Schottenheimer's son. Okay, so we are going to be back Monday, Wednesday, Thursday next week, continuing to advance things. And look, like spring practice is going to start in several weeks here. And so we will have to start locking in our rosters. We'll have National Signing Day coming up in a little bit, a spring portal window on the other side of spring practice, and lots more to get you set. I saw our friend Isaac in the tailgate earlier. It is sicko season. This is when we get ahead for 2025. This is when we get everything locked in and ready to go. As always, Thursdays are going to be the time to keep this thing interactive. It was our Locks pod. Now it's a time to have a conversation with you. You reach out, get us locked and loaded with those questions for the big old bag of mail. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip _Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.